Today on Substance Stories, we're going to be talking about harm reduction advice for stimulant drugs. So today on Substance Stories, we're continuing our series on harm reduction advice, and I'm going to talk about stimulants. So stimulants are broadly, when we talk about stimulants, we're talking about cocaine, we're talking about amphetamines, we're talking about drugs that really tend to have a high noradrenergic, dopaminergic effect. And what these drugs tend to do is they give us a lot of get up and go. So a lot of the harm reduction advice is about things like staying hydrated, right? So if we're getting a lot of get up and go, we're sweating a lot, we're not eating, we're at real risk of serious dehydration. And a lot of the harm that comes from stimulants is dehydration. The other thing, and it's in keeping with this dehydration, sort of our body running down, is avoiding physical activity. Because if we think about it, we're taking drugs that give us a lot of get up and go. They're already getting the fight or flight system pumping. If we then add to it, if we then start exercising intensely, we're putting more physical exertion on our body. We're going to raise our body temperature even further. We're going to get even more dehydrated. And that's when we start to potentially get at risks of heart difficulties or kidney difficulties from severe dehydration. The other thing to keep in mind is the rest that we need in between. So a lot of people on stimulants will go for days at a time, and that's really not good. During that period, we need to eat, we need to sleep. The body does not, even though we might not feel like we need it because we're on stimulants at the time, we absolutely do need it, and that's when we get harms like significant dehydration, running ourselves down, and as I said, with that kidney heart problem. So you've got to make sure you take breaks, take breaks, take a rest, make sure you're getting a meal in, make sure you're getting sleep in. A tricky thing about stimulants, as I said, they're noradrenergic, they're dopaminergic. These are things that really put us at risk for getting psychosis. And so the one thing we know about stimulant-induced psychosis is if we get it once, we're much more likely to get it another time. If we get it another time, we're much more likely to get it another time. And if we get it enough times, we won't even need the stimulants to get that psychosis. We'll get an enduring psychotic illness, which is probably best categorized, for one of the better word, as schizophrenia. So if we get psychosis just once from stimulants, that is an absolute line in the sand where we need to stop immediately. We need to get a lot of help, because otherwise we will end up with we're at a huge risk of ending up with a permanent psychotic illness. When we talk specifically about cocaine as a stimulant, it's important to keep in mind that stimulants, as I said, that they can be, especially the long-term side effects, them tend to be really cardiac. Really, we end up getting this thing called dilated cardiomyopathy. It's when essentially the heart, as a pump, it gets more balloon-like, and our heart can't really pump things around our body. We end up can't pull things from the bottom of our veins into our, back into our chest. We end up getting swelling in our legs as blood piles up. It's an awful way to die. Now, anything that puts that heart more at strain is bad. So absolutely taking breaks now in stimulants, not overusing them. Certainly don't want to be using stimulants every week. But another thing is, if we mix cocaine and alcohol, cocaine gets metabolized into an active metabolite, into a metabolite called cocaethylene. It acts a bit like cocaine, but it's got much worse cardiac side effects, and it lasts a lot longer. So mixing cocaine with alcohol can really, really add to that cardiac burden we're putting on ourselves. So again, it's something that we want to be really, really careful of. Finally, we are talking about illicit drugs here, right? And the thing about illicit drugs is they're unregulated and you don't know what's in them. So it's absolutely important, if you are going to use these drugs, which, just to be recap, I'm talking about harm reduction. I'm not advising the use of these drugs. I want to minimize the harm from drugs, and the best way to minimize the harm from drugs is to not use them. But if you are going to use these drugs, you've got to make sure that you know what you are taking. So there are testing facilities in Australia, in Canberra, in Melbourne, and festivals in Queensland. You can buy home testing facilities. And a lot of the things in the Canberra testing facilities, when they publish the results, and in an alarming amount of things that are brought in supposedly as sort of cocaine, there is no cocaine in them. And there's lots of nasty other medications that other sort of substances that can cause quite a lot of harm. A lot of the deaths that we see from stimulants are, especially when we talk about sort of ecstasy tablets, are actually from adulterants that are in there that are not intentionally put in there, but it's because these drugs aren't being made in perfect lab conditions. These are bathtub drugs, and these are not PhD chemists making them. So they often accidentally make things that can incredibly harm people, and that's where a lot of the deaths, especially when people are taking sort of ecstasy tablets or amphetamines, come from, is from an adulterant that's accidentally in there and causes a significant amount of harm. So it's absolutely worth your while doing testing. Of course, also we briefly mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but when we're talking about the way we use it, if you are snorting a drug, you make sure you use a douche. You make sure you don't share notes, because that's how Hep C spreads. If you are injecting a drug, you make sure you never share a needle. You make sure you're always using sterile equipment. There are safe injecting rooms everywhere. There are safe injecting, so there are needle syringe packs available widely. This is how you stop yourself from getting severe bloodborne viruses and potentially causing significant harm. Thank you so much for listening.